Thanks all for being here. Super excited about this reading. First, I'd like to begin by saying that we at Woodland Pattern acknowledge that in Milwaukee, we live and work on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homelands along the southwest shores of Michigami, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnic rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. We further acknowledge the grave evil colonialism introduced to these lands through genocide as well as slavery, but also via racist and xenophobic beliefs, laws, and practices that continue to inflict harm upon Black, Brown, and Indigenous lives. We honor those who have lived and do live now at these intersections of identity and experience, and are committed to the active dismantling of white supremacy. Many, many thanks to all of you. Thanks, of course, to Ted Rees, Jasmine Gibson, and D.S. Marriott for reading. That's just an incredible lineup. So thank you all. Thanks, Stacy Szymaszek, who organized this reading, and will be leading a workshop starting this weekend, Sunday, A Dollar's Worth of Blood, Please, Anti-Capitalist Poets. Yeah, everybody's favorite kind of poets, right? And so the reading and workshop are sort of a joint set of events that are meant to place emphasis on the intersection of poetry and creative practice and economic justice. These programs are part of a larger series of events that's been ongoing and will continue into the spring and thereafter, called The First Function of Poetry, Social Justice Series. And we've been fortunate enough already through that series to host Ross Gay, Amy Nezekuma-Tatil, Tongo Eisenmartin, Cecily Nicholson, Roger Bonaire-Agard, Kwabena Nixon, Ashley Lucas, and Jamal Smith. And of course, tonight's guests, Ted, Jasmine, and David. So already an amazing run of programs and folks that we've been hosting. Coming up in this series next, the next iteration will be March 18th and 19th, focused on the climate crisis. That'll be a reading and a panel style discussion featuring Brian Tier, Craig Santos Perez, and Mona Lisa Saloy. So that's March 18th and 19th. And then another event on May 19th and 20th, we'll host Monica Sock, Maider Vang, and Dunya McHale for programs focused on poetry and refugee communities. All of this is made possible with support from the Milwaukee Arts Board and Wisconsin Arts Board, so thank you very much to those organizations. I'm just gonna share real quick, so we have our events just on the main page of our website, woodlandpattern.org. If you just scroll through, there's the list of events there. So the ones I've just mentioned that are upcoming will be up imminently. So be on the lookout for more details about those and other events happening this spring. And thanks for being at this event. So we have books for sale through our online book center. So I want to share that link too. I hope you'll visit us there, of course, in lieu of being able to shop at the physical space right now. So, of course, books for sale by Ted, Jasmine, and David, but also by Stacy, of course, who in this is acting this evening as host and curator, but also, of course, a remarkable poet as well. So, books by all of them. Also, I want to call your attention to the fact that David Marriott's most recent book, while out of print, is available through Commune Editions for free as a PDF. So unfortunate that it's out of print, but glad that it is available that way. So I wanted to share that link too, so that because all amazing books, and you should check them all out, whether through our shop or otherwise. So I'm almost done with my announcements here. Let's roll through these and then we can kick it over and have the reading begin. In order to create the greatest possible access to our programs, also we've been presenting on a give what you can basis, which we've carried over to this virtual space as we're presenting here for the time being. We're a nonprofit organization, so individual support goes quite a long way towards helping to sustain us and help us continue doing what we're doing. So if you're in a position to give, we'd be deeply grateful. But of course, just you being here for this event and for other events is the best form of support. So thanks for that. And just some logistical things. We'd love to see you throughout the reading. But if you could mute your audio during the reading portion and throughout, we will have time for some Q&A after the reading. And it'll be clear when we sort of shift gears into that, but we can field questions via the chat. And so give some consideration to any thoughts or questions you might have. And I hope that you will share those. Okay, so those are my announcements. And now I'm really glad to turn things over to Stacy Szymaszek, who's the author of currently 5 books, most recently including A Year From Today from Nightboat Books and Journal of Ugly Sights and Other Journals, which won the Autoline Prize from Fence Books and was nominated for a Lambda Literary Award. Her 6th book, Famous Hermits, is forthcoming this year. Szymaszek was the director of the Poetry Project from 2008 to 2018, and before that worked at Woodland Pattern, and during that time and ever since has done so much to champion what we're doing. So we're, of course, always and ever super grateful for the impact that she's had and continues to have on Woodland Pattern as well. And it's just always incredible pleasure to collaborate with Stacy. So Stacy, thank you so much for bringing this all together and for being here, and welcome.
Thank you. I like seeing all the silent hands clapping. Thank you very much. I'm absolutely thrilled to have been invited to program this reading for Woodland Pattern's Poetry and Economic Justice series. And thank you so much to Laura and Jenny and Mike and the rest of the staff for hosting this and for the vital work that you do. Becoming more involved in the life of Woodland Pattern over the past year during the months of quarantine has been both grounding and a joyful homecoming for me. And I worked here from there, from 1999 to 2005. And the experiences I had are formative and have been formative to all of the work that I do to strengthen anti-capitalist, anti-bureaucratic infrastructures for poets and poetry, however large or small they may be. I'm really looking forward to listening to Ted Rees, Jasmine Gibson, and D.S. Marriott tonight. In my reading practice, I seek poems that give me information I cannot find anywhere else. Because I am a poet, mostly this information is about poems, which helps me understand the world and how I want to ethically be in it. My encounters with these 3 poets have been influential in my continuing desire to know and use poetry's power to disrupt what Jasmine has poignantly called the state's stranglehold on our lives. The upside of this, how can we use poetry's power to create personal autonomy, relationality, and liberation through making poems active sites for language and political inquiry? The theme of this reading is anti-capitalist poetics. A practical question I wanted to answer: what are some things an anti-capitalist poem does? Reading these very stylistically distinctive poets over the past week, I was moved by the ways each of them brings lived experience, open and non-reductive, of capitalism's deleterious and disastrous impact on human bodies to the page, without ever limiting the body to the category of subject matter. Some of their lines that still whirl in my head. From D.S. Marriott: I, who was neither strong nor heroic, neither rich nor cruel, the years spent doubled over under the mishaps of speech. And Ted Rees: here's more, I was broke, so stole eggs and bread. I was broke and lazed in bed, spying my dream life in labor vortex. Jasmine Gibson: I impaled myself onto the history of Thursday, a length known in meters, something where only aloe plants can become trees. I also appreciate the different experiences of time each poet gave me through their understanding of how to break a line and other formal innovations, the creative tension they gave the structure of my calendar to days. Another part of anti-capitalist poetry could then be a disobedient practice that liberates our time back into the realms of the nonlinear, the erotic, the circadian, the invented dwelling, the experimental foot, the organically human. I'm going to stop talking now so we can experience the work itself. It is my honor to present to you in this order, Ted Rees, Jasmine Gibson, and D.S. Marriott.
Wow, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Stacy, and thanks for having all of us, Mike and the folks at Woodland Pattern, and it's a real joy. And I think this is the second time we read together, Jasmine, but it's the first time I'm reading with David, and so I'm very happy to be doing so. It's going to be great. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book, which is obviously ironically titled. There are many reasons why it's ironically titled, but I'm not going to read the section of the book that kind of gets into that, though I guess the entire book is about that. Anyway, so this is Thanksgiving, and so I'm going to read about the last 20 pages or so. And yeah. How many bodies hidden in the tall grasses, the prairie's secrets, sentineled cement, blocks thrumming with cattle wire. What he said was this: the worse things get out in the world, the better things get in jail. Always there's a new job, a new opportunity for towns to keep their tax base. The council whoops, shrieks, national retail distress. It's a movement based on plywood, surfeit, tetanus, and sporting goods shops. House up in the hills has gates and cameras, eyeing the scrub and gravel at all hours. Yes, sir. This could be heaven. Waking up in a blanket, in a drainage ditch, rifle beside me. People think I'm just joking. I'll show them ha-has, then wander the roads leading toward the camp's remnants marked with a bronze plaque. Do you understand the procedure now? Just stop a few of their machines, radios, and telephones, lawn mowers, throw them into dark for a few hours, then sit back and watch the pattern. Adverse conditions and everyone seen becomes an adversary. I lost my senses in Dollar General searching for the batteries for the damn remote. Satellite Man came. Children stuck in pens, rivers rising, tent cities kaleidoscoping, the return of the hookworm, ever gazing west. Larks in this country been singing the same 5 notes for thousands of years, and now they twitter at impossible city, whirling to avoid gunfights and crackle, the direct correlation between rayon's rise and the mystery of structures raised in desert wastes. What's being built in there? Only guessed. There's an old VW bug rusting out back between the woods start and the damned alfalfa farm. You have a cowlick. I want that $50 you owe me. I mean now. I'll kick in the door. I'll buy a handle of vodka and leave my room key on the ashtray. A body realized and it wasn't mine. Guess who? I apologize. I am forgetting my purpose here. To find Gary Mathias, Or even better, find Sheena between lodges, Courtney Lafreniere, Hannah Harris, or Henny Scott. Start a large fire burning underneath the fucked condition in which we must commit to such searches, trawling the creeks and alleys for soaked remnants of beings who are with targets ever at their backs. Smoke 'em if you got 'em, folks. It hasn't ended until all of Joy's moats have been carefully placed in deluxe marble, mortar, and pestles and ground to the finest dust, incorporated into new plastics, then shipped to China, then back to this cursed dream set wherein Remington will find manufacturer use in its new gun line sold to the Saudis. Fascinating. The vibrance of these wide brush strokes, their rapid movements to contain their subjects in Providence's frag of triumph banners and diseased put-ons. Hard for mama. Circular motions all nasty. They get all gushy and wet and ha 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 ha, front lawn screamathon until we go off the air. It's that these movies depict a menace that finds its bald sustenance in the blood of teens. White, middle-class teens, caretaking, fucking, screaming, parables dripping with red sex panic. Our children cooperate. Who will now repaint our domestic lines? What to do with half Timmy and floofers? Now our oldest are commies. I flicked a booger into your Cheerios whole milk. A glass every meal, you stoop-shouldered honky turd. He dropped acid and ran far down the beach. Then melted into the spray, its apparition. Wow. Lots of glitter in these fresh sea bass stomachs. Such a fun party at Death Hippie Manse, compounds tucked in the valley, frying in July as crunched thud of bass slurs the hills and flings me toward quicksilver-tinged lakes. It was massacre. Children using reeds to breathe. Decent plaque, I guess. The casino grins, though redress doesn't suffice. It's still a culture. Seawater crimson, arroyo crimson, the plains grasses washed scarlet. In Hopper's paintings of houses, austerity purses its thin lips in a clarity symptomatic of the world as will for a few who, strangely absent, continue to sip highballs and gloat while walking down the long boardwalk through the expansive carpet of sand and marram to their private roar. They look back at the house and its solitude, set apart in bliss, and admire their own doings. The atelier in Paris, cabin in Taos, loft on Bowery, and this ocean, yes, this very ocean in its luxurious guile. Sneers of cold command volley back and forth. Whose spirit is this? We said. It's JP Morgan Chase and Company, just crushing the damn game, bro. Get me extra foam on my flat white, dude, and a single pump of that vanilla syrup. Around the corner, it was noon at the gangway, but cyber yellow light showered on us, so it appeared early yet, coated in tricks cum and waltzing the gulch. The barflies looked dead, but leered, and we ordered beers to celebrate what would feed us for the next weeks, a few hundreds deep, desperate, disparate in our thoughts, but sexy, sick, and dumbly raucous. It felt so worn out, the softness of the moment. Toilet reeked of piss. A few rounds of pool, faux wood paneling, mirrors, an old disco track. The elusive thread was lost shortly thereafter. The fucking cranes rise. Tiny pump jacks skew the vista. We play some pool in another bar in another state and continue to forget our purposes here. To emulsify jargon into a poison brand of canned chip dip and distribute it to co-working offices' break rooms, collapsing button-down buns, gasping for air with last words. Grow killer systems. Engage the sticky functionalities, evolve front-end synergies, embrace frictionless paradigms, enhance global pod communities, orchestrate viral solutions, eyeball benchmarks granularity, leverage wearable hashtags, expedite supply chains, value-added portals, empower extensible mind sharing, and so on till you kick the kale smoothie from his smooth ass paws and he expires like those Soylent packs we dumpstered behind Facebook HQ years ago. At dinner functions, they tell polite jokes about children stuck in pens, lucrative contracts with private security forces, the homeless. It is one long bray that stretches like choice taffy, banana flavored. It's important that I don't get too much knowledge about the past, or I might just end up like the last executive, body in pieces post lofty dive from my 44th floor office. We shall overcome by slight adjustments to our blindfolds per annum, but make no mistake. We are the firing squad, the death squad, the junta squad, the putrid mass graves our squad goals, cigs in our mouths, pull a Lindy, as they say, we oblige, standing, hooding, sleep deprivation, subjection to noise. These do not occasion suffering of particular cruelty implied by the word. Children stuck in pens under a freeway. 2 weeks pass, it's a bar lounge and some poets sip Manhattans and slap themselves on the back. So brave. I wake up most days wishing for this to reveal itself a shit glitch. His head was displayed in numerous county sideshows. A band played along. You don't want to mess with those boys. They'll string you up or get you dead-like with choppers hidden in bushes or spent truck tires. The Mickey D's bag is brimming vials and it's 110 in the shade. Mama carrying a black hefty bag filled with cans and bottles down the boulevard, feet in tore up flip-flops in the heat's exhaust and grease. Since we can't fight God, we'll fight everyone. Sing it, old buddy. That tune, that tune that starts like, looking out a door. You know the one. It's right there on the playlist called Import-Export Shows of Colonial Glory, grabbed from the cashier and gib-gab gobbled. Blue are the streets, what I think I should have written. I am forgetting my purpose here. Scour till I get to bone. Washington's dentures, soil along the Natchez Trace below Carlisle, the wastes and craters north of Alturas, the banks of the Missouri and Wall Street, a jaw washed ashore, ancient fibers wrapping the branch caught by nylon nets cruising the swamps. The shots move from one door by the front porch all the way through. See, you can spy them whizzing by from the dang privy. It's an enfilade of privation and hunting scenes scoring the walls. It's a procession that is bloated and spasmic in its confidence. It's that one cannot become lost in the mazes as their condition demands lostness. What? What's that sultry boy crooning? State of the nation, drifts reaching gutters, and a large white man smiling with a sharpened maul. It's reliable. These are the litanies sung, ringing bells, sources of joy and stripped lust to the mashing populace, the carillon spires thrusting toward heaven, that chimera so fondled by the whip hand's sway. I'll cheers to that, pal. Antidote to the poison we just drank. We drink continuously to keep the shakes in the bay and the hay all stacked. I had a headache, but I couldn't stop walking. Elevated tracks above, the aural and clacking of light at noon on a droll Tuesday, interrupted by this man blasting clarinet in the shallow scene that still resembles narratives of redemption, except his trilling and overblowing stared at another untouched blaze, the corner house all ply and old char and brick. What was dreamed again? Oh, right. Him smashing these notes up and down the scale and the signs reading, everything must go. Thank you.
I wanted to have a vocal like applause. Thank you, Ted. It's been too long since we've read together. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to the Woodland Pattern staff for having Ted, myself, and David Marriott. All right, I'm gonna start off with some poems from Don't Let Them See Me Like This. This is Primitive Accumulation. If it's historical, it's hysterical. Reading like a commercial that folds upon you along the trip to sleep. I didn't know there was an alternative to capital and that I could press one on one with body against cement, one on one with debt because it's the definite lover, the complete God walks with me in sleep, one on one because what happened at the bar in my pants on your mouth does not make it to the meeting, even if everyone can smell me on you, sweet and full of darkness, demons. I believe that proper words are teachers and police officers that restrain little girls. And don't worry when their bodies don't make a sound when their skull hit the concrete. But again, one on one. Imagine all of the stories slaves would have written if they didn't die writing with their flesh. Instead, their flesh was for a sadistic master in our age of enlightenment. Tell me when it hurts, I'll keep going. Most of the people we love died without graves. We start to fail when we think we can no longer win and everything is comfortable still where it is. And the skin is just a fact, not remembering how it got there, but only realizing when it breaks and cracks that it's truly romantic to be temporal. You'd rather be guilty than learn from your mistakes. Let me know I'm the only one that can tear you from the inside out, acutely bring you under heat lamps only for growing purposes so that any inkling of doubt can be cast away. Gulls screeching into the streets, hoping to bring some life to them and maybe even disease, because isn't that the closest of how we feel? Splitting the soul into four so that we can wander and never rest. The people want to know, is everything fucked as they say it is? In the metal, write your name. I want it on my chest like all sick, wet things that go to rest there. The whiskey is always there for me to sidle up to. Then I'm gonna read some new stuff. Paregoric. There's a limp in my voice that gives out through my knee. I heard someone with the same thing, except it made the sound of wind going through a tunnel of concrete and mortar and scar tissue. We should all blame the cops for the influence that they have on infrastructure. Only poor people find rat heads fried in their Happy Meals. What's up with that? Is it as universal affirmation to be on guard for terror? Biological comes to you in a most comfortable way. All of the roads in West Philly are uneven, making my body rattle, shaking as I enter a new atmospheric understanding of past grudges. There's so many dialects for the hour of the night. I should never leave my home for nests and scales. Burning with the fervor of a choir of my enemies, shaking and rocking their bodies back and forth, lulling themselves in a chant of my name. I spent too much time staring into the sun, into the reflection of the sun, that when I look down at my stomach, I and others have been almost dying from allergic reactions. Women handling snakes. I wrestle with you, give you my name, display it in my inner lining. I spoke in your Christ wound, grew razors in my mouth. Borders became closed, my skin buckled in between places. My capillaries expand as I sew a coat big enough for our lungs to constrict. Our class is showing in the way we wheeze in our sleep. The most impactful autoimmune disease is not what you think it is. And how could it be fixed in our veins when they were lined with nickel and copper and dreams that were aspiring to be upwardly mobile? Who loves the sun, baby? Who can afford these highways when my exchange rate is the polyps of the Bronx? Who wants the sun, baby? Who can give birth without hesitation and advanced directives of bleeding out on the concrete slab in public housing that greets you every morning? Who loves the sun, baby? When I'm fissure in all social relations, in class analyzing alkalines, my teeth to chalk. Who can have the sun, baby? When I can't have you or our memories of us, when liberal theories and violent autotherapy keeps us from you. Lord willing, and the flare-up doesn't commence. Return of Saturn. I'm a carp on the ocean. I've searched through the peepholes of space, through the cosmic brain, scoured and wrestled through tendrils, been rocked back and forth. Others have argued in the name that my essence is dead, but all in all, still alive, buried and warm. How deep is the valley? How deep is the valley underneath the multitude of orgasms felt and unfelt between bites of honeydew melon within the deep and mucus-lined halls of history gushing over my jaws onto my chest, into your mouth, spit it back at me. I'm not offended. It kills my soul. And in that moment, I swear I almost reached nirvana, but was interrupted by 2 missed calls. Hello? Yes. The way you communicate makes me sick inside. Hello? Yes. Okay, have a good one. With blood still wet on the ground, this is the question you pull from your heart to ask me. Let the future and past remain unsplit. Uranus. Icky shame that I've placed into a box beneath the garden bed. I went down into the bed of lake, fought against the pressure, fought against the burning of lung and esophagus lighting, breaking open my ribcage to leave space for impossibilities to arise and for future weapons, shivs and shanks to be formed with care, and whispers of evocations etched in marrow. We humbly invite you all and hope that you accept our invitation to visit the final resting place of the capitalist stakeholders, petty landlords, and those that wish against life to sustain deadly pleasures of the pockets. We throw dirt upon the past, we bury your land deeds, we make no use for a song because we have a disco right after such occasion. We have no tears to shed, we have been wrung dry. We have no praises to sing now that our tongues are untied. We have no caresses to leave the ungrateful dead because we have finally have life. Perhaps Nikita was right and we should all bury them all and let us get on with it and be done. Love came my way. The weight of my love for you is a plantation on fire and every financial system choking on the gravity of reparations. The weight of my love for you is the antithesis of the result of pundits fervently insisting that cops exist in the future when every slave troll has its day and meets its end. The weight of my love for you is in the twisting of ankles after the storming of the gates of heaven We all limp into the aftershock of a bender, letting you know to throw down the arms you found me in as I'm nodding off into oblivion that I wish to reside in. The weight of my love for you is the failing of the global economy because it couldn't enumerate all the tongues and accents for joy and the 9 of cups echoing, I have everything I want. I am what I want. It is our love song. It is our disco. Food, not bombs. I find myself in you, stumbling into places when you spoke of witch hunts becoming part of primitive accumulation. The question also begged the present reality of who would be there to take care of children. We all know how to find that nick of love in a little knife play, welling up in the form of bright rubies, making space for Bakunin against the state form and a side of potatoes. Seizing Kropotkin in a quick sandwich, we know how to make do with what's given. We wish to extend this invitation to taste lemonade-flavored oceans, with parsons hidden in the hint of dill, of onion-based broth, dialectical tricks, balagoon dictating the movements of the body under stress, but always with the promise of relief. Always, always that our most vulnerable deserve love in warm, sunny places. Hollow Delta. Freedom and capital can be measured in furloughs. Diagonally, the lovers have merged with the state. The scene has merged with the state. The scene, like the barricades, cannot hold out against Saturn, but who will pay the price? Suicide happens by proxy. We get a dose of it in our feeds, keeping us enraptured, utterly brokenhearted, lonely like God. We lost in school, we lost in the hospital when all that was given was Haldol because the voices we hear are loud and external, telling us struggle is gradual. Don't you want to function? But my body was in pain now, with my heart slipping out of my anus because of my sphincter got too weak from the stress of holding shit in. We lost in church because the preachers, pastors, clergy are all silent when Black women are murdered by Black ex-police officers, and Black on Black crime becomes null because this is about lost masculinity. And there it is, a hum of, and the church say, amen. We lost in work. We lost in romance when we don't have to die as a result of the passion of our lovers because we can't submit, so we are beaten because only the abuse of our corpses can be proved to be innocent and worthy of love. I can tell you how this story should end, something like the middle passage reciting on a Tuesday under a blood moon, whispering. I know people who would have been happy just to taste the sun once, really, but this should be the true ending. We should repeat and fuck to. If Black lives matter, then that means the destruction of America, the entirety that vibrates down deep into the core of the earth to emerge and destroy Europe and its imaginings of it. I am the angel knocking on your door to let the disease in. The place that I fit in doesn't exist until I destroy it. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Yeah, how do I follow that? I feel like a language lamp has been turned on in my head. So what you're going to get is the light cast by that. Hopefully some light anyway. So what I'm going to do is just read some tribute poems to some of the grime and drill artists I like, and then maybe read some more contemporary poems written during lockdown. So I'm going to begin with the tributes. This preface to this book, Duppies, is called 16 Bars. Grime is late shift, 0 hour. It makes a beeline for bare life, but what it lays bare leaves everyone cold. Grime is a thread that links Afro-pessimism to Afro-futurism, but its role proceeds without ties or duplicity. Grime is post-work and post-Brexit. Its rhythms respond to the necessity in which I exist. See these wheels, they may be brand spanking new, but under the bonnet there's fever and anguish. Grime is lost orders, a mugging made up by thefts, an evocation stripped down to the bone. It expels pagans with a fierce rigor and method in which only the coldest excel. Grime is disjunctive, a useless meditation on parataxis. Think of the absolute having to earn its living, but finishing up with hardly anything at all. Grime is payback for N-words and ASBOs. It has dominion, but no license, for each dissolve is charged with an ASBO. It makes music from a manner that is not me, but what it gives has neither use value nor beauty. Grime is a medium of the unknown. It refuses everything but possibility. Its violence is one without immunity, but its real is dispossession and is inconsolable without knowing it. This poem's called Murking After Stormzy. Think of a moment exploding as the pulse leads us on into unaccustomed light. Everyone astonished at the unerring cold of 1,000 cellular voices. The panic desensitized by suspicion, the walls bathed in sweat, bodies in a heap forgotten in the basement. This is no joke, Star. How many yous knows me are in this place? Talk to anyone. Violence is no more or less than beauty. The sudden imploding trace, the realist codes flashing like sirens. There's no one here, so whose song is this? Still embracing, still linking the downs that made us give up the towns that made shit one of the seasons. The rain pouring down all the elsewheres and maybe nevers of experience. And here I am, barefoot bleeding, leaning against the popo so viciously off key. From one imploding moment to the next, the human orphaned from its spirit, where each thing granted is further off, fenced, and each random zero is beside itself with boredom, still murking, still mired in the never, never. Me, a man singing in the circuits, hearing a voice bored by itself, a voice reserved for nothing, the smoked just too pure for what really matters, when the fix remains too fixed for the expanses, the distances, and passion is the least delirious, and what remains of the junk means that what could not be made good is the still point of heaven. That's how it is. The infinite always dissolving into leaven, like ash in celestial fire. The remainder suddenly flooded with stars. In me, a petrol-soaked carnage, its art igniting fires on the streets. This poem is called From 696 Till, and it's after this drill artist called Skendo. It's new. Now let me just explain. 696 is a public notice order issued by the Metropolitan Police, primarily to ban drill artists from performing in London and also banning them from using certain words. It's one of the most, it's a weird law insofar as it bans artists from using certain words. And so it's unprecedented in that regard. Anyway, from 696 till. Black slush on the pavements, tea and smoke, neon and cloud, the unjust punishment of sentences. Guilty because we have guessed the right word, the song wise in our ignorance. Otherwise, how could we know it? And again, the great urban precincts where every prodigious spectator is freed to police. Let's agree on the delusion. These tongues know that there's a hole in truth, a harness for the purest starfighter, the most unruly set free to nothing, the law of death in the ends. As each verse cleaves through the air and every crew waits to be released, mindful of zeros, full of echoes, of Trojan echoes, where only the most original numbers can be heard. Hitting ancient streets where we go out in search of new tags, as cells glow in the underpass, lit up by the once over. The pleasures of naming violence when the world is locked in, and getting paid is the only answer to a loss of speech. Meanwhile, An infinite thousand notes form the walls of a cell, the daily margins of a new era. Still, the beef is ours. It's all over the news. The jam it drips, leading each one homewards. Still, white wings thunder over black ponds. The long centuries thrown off dub ships into the strobe light of cities. How we cowered under masks in silence. Now that the call to others is no longer shackled, speechless, and the crowns to be blooded put wrong notes in one's place, closed in by ridiculous rules, untimely sentences, but a subtlety, and this is the gist, is a ruse of foreboding, is a faith beyond knowledge and understanding, which is why to drill is to learn how not to die, to enjoy the power, weighing fine robes tarred by platinum, the impossible wound in someone else's drawing, a shiv sunk inside a comma when the only dead listener isn't likely to be you. What a strange way to send flowers when burial is not what is meant. The message like strewn salt, not to bow down to others when the decision is not to kill. Even as they big up the greatest allegiance, gone like the clappers, for they know that the world despises them, which is why they despise in turn. For who can bar these bars? Who can stun festivals in doorways? Well-combed judges drop like flies, for they know nothing but their own conceited expectations. In the heartlands it dawns. Blackness is the new plague that contaminates, eviscerates all argument, all learning. For what it forbids, it celebrates beyond the shock of forged licenses, the delirium of its casting, no longer nameable, even though it confines and uplifts us, echoing descents that never end. Okay, a couple more tribute poems. This one first to Bob Kaufman, who published by City Lights, and is a member of the Beats. I don't know if you know him, but this one's called Blue in Bando. Say true to yourself, take a draw but don't speak, the eye blooded by feeling heartbreak, and a mouth that says it's time to talk about what cannot be seen, that weighs so delicately the fatigue of bone behind plaster walls humming, where the dream is simply the air breathed in, the wounds firm as the chance that went missing, honeyed in ruins. And all faces, all escapes are static with the heightened manifestation that God himself brings closer with each convulsion. A body owned, scarred, but grown old in the newlywed's bed. The aspirated fall of deep sadness, like a bridal witness, was forgotten to ring, the party long since departed. And how helplessly splayed everything is, your exhausted rush to be ceasing, and as it were, ceaselessly wanting nothing but this. Orgies of soundless pleasure, a pleasure sweeter for being filled by the delirious, tedious approximation of water in a desert, blood in the till. And this one is poem is called Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. It's taken from the well-known song by Mingus, but it's in memoriam for Sean Bonney, a British poet who died a year or so ago. Because it is hidden, secret, geheim, and all traces of it impenetrable, distant, like sirens blissfully sounding in the dark. What enters, so assiduously broken, is also what ends. The enforced meaning, stop, police, how it enters the fray. After all, no one really knows what words want. These songs wearing peasant shoes on strange, stumpy legs. The scattering, random, blood-stained, and everyone running in the streets. As someone hears it once again, the unluckiest bright lit arrangements of burnt ships fired into flame. as it enters the bones, like a harmony that awaits you, and everything just chokes. The world assiduously grasping for air amid the noise of infantries clouding all sense, the unbridled rush to find them like barricades unveiled on video after the briefest command, run, is impeded by the wild, intemperate meandering of silence and sex, and the big foaming mouth announces that every rib is cracked again by the haute valet of each utterance. When being human involves just listening to the rain, the revenge of elegies, and mastery is just the impermanent briefest of rests in desperate resorts, where we know it all ends. And I am you, and each wishful moment is a decapitation, a thought that twists because of what it notices it no longer lives. And it is impossible to say no too soon. And now suddenly the sea burns, drowned, parched by flame, and someone beckons and reminds you that each gathering is a celebration of the already dead. And each word matters less than it should, the hard facts fluttering like banners over blood-soaked pavements. And methinks there are years here, ranged like so many antlers, memories of cognac and Latin, and as anarchists start slashing at pictures once again, and you cut here and here, the asymptotic glimpses of the dark, fluent sequels in Berlin, London, and the great gates of Ishtar, where all the shrouds are veiled, which can only mean that life is a phal, a theatre, or that someone, the wealthiest art lover, has reached down into each word and cut out the name of each cameo? Or is it simply because I miss you, running through the rain-drizzled streets, and all I have are clouds rioting in dark ancestral languages? Okay, I'm just moving on from tributes now to pop poems, which are, I suppose, much more miserable, written down during lockdown. I'm going to read a couple of poems and then I'll just end with these two. So these are literally written in the last couple of months, few months. This one's called But Lamps, Lamps. I looked sick as a dog, a pony outside, a ton in, like an old person with a young person's eyes. It was a bit of a mirage, like 7 Valentines around my head. My face a door, but someone had slammed shut or suddenly lets fall open, and the soul finds itself stranded, and what the fuck crowns every act with sophism. And when all that shit finished, I was prepared to take my last stand, even though I knew that every bird in the hand was less close to finding its place in the sun, or be crowned with new myths and legends. Anyways, I was uneasy. I'd had enough of it. I was once again in love with God, but the gaiety felt kinda off, alien even, like a dog seeking eternity when all bets are ante-post, the sources ebbing. And that's how I died today, flayed with the electric off, and the knife smashing as though I possessed it, and a hurting a white flower pinned to my chest, and the pale wings of linear time soaring like sinners veiled pilgrims as he came in his pants, and I felt good, devoted, here in his flat, desiring no end but what was glistening inside me, the evening blue serene, clear as heaven, until my throat fell apart and my being throbbed with impotence, and I thought, it's all right. Just look at the filth I've made, and all the blood on my lips, stars at sunset, a dense cluster of red, blue, and white desires. And as I fell upon my knees, vast armies of demons looked on with children playing in the wreckage. Yes, it was all right, for no one neither knows nor cares. Even though I've hoarded stars and pilgrims and wickednesses for which every description was inadequate. And what the fuck? What's happening here then if not the will of God? The trick of it, the hurting. And how glad I was that I managed to forgive the infidel, to just let him have it. Thinking blood was a becoming, the sperm a display, right here for me to find my way back, to be right on time, again in love with infinite longing, to dwell in the apple of his eye, bathed in morning. Even though I'm worn out, I'm shaking like a leaf, and he is so long in coming, and I am dumb with the wonder of stars descending into the pity of the tomb, and how my life has almost slowed to nothing. The ecstasy of the heavens breaking over the bookies. And he said he couldn't care less, and that I was just a dumb bitch that would soon no longer exist. And oh, I thought, am I? Oh, Jesus, why am I so dark and lightless? Why, as a young child, did you come into my life with your sorcerer eyes? I knew that I had to give all of my attention to you when I smelled your breath on my hand. And it smelt of new life without scarves, of flesh blinded by silk, where no one could see spaces between the bruises. Okay, this poem, if I can find it, it's called Movements, Monuments. Yeah. And Movements, Monuments, obvious title really. And it has an epigraph, kind of fictional epigraph, Negerisch Wonat de Mensch. 1. The greatest threat is from blackening clouds, which is why possibilities emerge with the sound of birds and voicelessly fly back to destruction. Day dart rounds like promises made at a fork in the road. This is how things come and go, become a parting of the ways, a fall infinitely gentle, unfortunate, of which it is said, force like lightning is penned in by distance. And yet I haven't been breathing now for 70 years. I think it's because I'm sick or stupid, skinny with sickle cell fat, with uneasiness. The coming storm will not save me. A vast sea of vogelfry will neither go back nor disperse, and who untamable are hurled down, defaced. And they are my sweetest obscenity. As if the breathed in air was evening, a golden mask to gag on. It takes plenty of cunning not to confound freedom with contagion, compliance with will. Soon we'll be living like ghosts, passing through menacing doors, gazing upon the nakedness of our lives like the last excluded customer. But this here's not the place for you. Locked down in pronoun, resigned to everything, simile. 2. And in the morning, I am finally able to join the long queues of funerals. The line is slow and strangely noisy before the creators call it a night and go home. The rooms we live in, cloistered in silence and unforgettable elements. In every corner is scarcely believable dust and metaphysical holes full of human ambiguity. Everything closer is far away, and everything certain never was. It's been a while since the rope and the hemp were so stoically, lovingly held by those held down to slaughter. And it does seem that a crack has appeared in everything witnessed. I'm thinking of a crown, a surplice, blackly domed landscape. Life leads us out of it. Time closes us in. But time itself gives us pause, and each marbled suspense is itself suspended with pinpointed strokes, and every terrible moment equal to a slaughterhouse, a life blooded. Sister, Sometimes I feel gaslit by the postman, as if the unknown is my address and no one at home the sender. Everything lived for someone else's proof of purchase. The unsigned check, the closest thing to redemption, despite the strange shame in cutting it. 3. You've seen all this before. The unkind kindnesses, the unremarked surrender, when the only lives lost are routinely black. And it dawns on you that the only one to lie is the one flush with deception, whose illusion is taken on trust, because it is the source of all sickly resolution. The scams by which we are caught on Insta, when the price of a platform is the freedom to hand over one's identity willingly, like a boyhood faith in invulnerable gods, where everything seems possible, the nothingness of a desire unable not to desire. Who can say give it back when to be stolen is just the stuff of dreams? One's identity nothing more than a sheet of paper on which it is written, not truth, but an endless self-portrayal of an unknown purpose or nature. As if the ink were a mirror, a medium, and each word a lifestyle guru, a maze shaped into image, franked and stamped by an unreachable hopefulness. Stay disappeared, says milk, naked as the day that once more crowns you, a victim of everything you are. Blindsided, duct-taped, superglued to each purple tweet, and each composed selection haloed bloodshot by lonely, unspent misery. And in return, our blind hands perform yet another version of persuasion, mirroring the algorithmic immensities of what we virtuously imagine to be, what we know and know not to be virtuous or true. 4, as any child will tell you, perhaps we are too rarefied to link up, too extra not to throw shade. Your words sharper than pepper spray before the air desecrates us. Until today, to be another was to be true to an insatiable wish to please, but no longer. There's no more whiteness, just the wish to break out of our improper dark. No time to bode the stranger who breathes beside you, the grey hordes waiting at the caring gate. But who can return us back to ourselves when distance is neither place nor departure, and being with is nothing but horror? A crater in each solitary terrain, the force detonating by reinforcing distance. 5 is probably why others plummet on waxen wings or loom up from innumerable seas, on beaches where promises are bait rings, and what surrounds us is something shocking, colossal, without amnesty, heavy with astonishment and pulled teeth. This absurdity in which cruelty is de rigueur, cloud bird and so much more than virtue. Yes, you who walk without right or conscience. For loneliness is the manure from which each thought blooms, and anxiety is just a rug to be beaten or a dog lovingly walked to death in wheat fields camouflaged by machinery. Like almonds milked white by being crushed and swallowed in one gasp so as to be kept secret. Each step follows innocence, and every breath opens its mouth to destiny. 6. A page turns and each word burns. Curfews ebb like suns of rained-in disappointments. Black lives like leaves the nighttime sheds, like week-old lottery tickets. The river you step in, and for the innocent a vast swarm of birds. Nothing, can you feel it? A kind of jam for tough eggs, and every loving hope wished for, shadow upon shadow of seething doubt. The way, a marble depth, black with cloud, plummets in confederacy. For passion needs no other. It holds nothing but itself. The looking glass a shard, the looking glass a shard of so much cynicism. A stumbling block, an empty pail of water, the awaited, changeless epiphany of crushed mouths under black stars. Bulbs flicker under huge trees, and what is more, manifest a world of number and simile. A light, only half discernible, barely believable, black as birds set free. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, David, Ted, Jasmine, just remarkable readings all around. Much appreciated. So now we can sort of shift into, we've got a little bit of time here. If anybody has some like a question, thought they'd like to ask here, if you do, please, if you could put that in the chat, that would be great. And yes, of course, share, yeah, like share all the love, right, in the chat as well. So yeah, if anybody has any questions. Also, I mean, we're, you know, probably the world would be fine and the Zoom meeting would, you know, stay, we'd be okay if you unmuted yourself maybe and asked a question too, right? So we can wing it that way. So questions, anybody? Just speechless because of the amazingness. Well, here's one from Peter. Peter, thanks. Has the isolation of the past year changed the way you write poems?
Does somebody want to jump in? Well, I mean, if no one else is going to jump in, I'll get it started then. Well, given the theme of the evening is kind of anti-capitalism, I mean, the thing you know, let me just step back a bit in order to answer the question. There used to be an idea, especially in American poetics or North American poetics, that kind of communication and capital went hand in hand. And, you know, in other words, that it was a kind of sellout to invest in the poetics of communicability. And but all the poets that matter to me, and including the poets this evening, what's interesting about their poems, to me, is the way in which they give expression to something without communicating something obvious, and in a way which forces kind of to confront reality in a different way. And in a sense, during isolation, I've had to think about what reality actually is, because it kind of disappeared. It lost its boundaries or borders. And by which I mean, I kind of descended into kind of madness or thought perversity. And that was everydayness. It wasn't because I was missing people. I can't stand people, don't get me wrong. But I was missing the distraction of people. I was missing the distraction of other people's languages, which again forces you up against the limits of your own reality. And it's important, I think, even if you can't stand the noise of other people, and you can't understand them, and they don't communicate to you what you want to be communicated, nonetheless, it's still important to hear them. And hear them not just as noise, but as forms of being. So I started writing in lockdown to get myself out of a sense of irreality or unreality.
What about you, Jasmine? Or
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, it's interesting because I work as a social worker, so I feel like I was thrust into a different kind of reality where, yeah, you just see people's lives kind of change in slow motion over the year, and up until now, where it's like a full year of being inside. And my baby sister works in a hospital, so it felt like Some days it feels like I'm very much in the world, even though physically I'm not there. And I think kind of mentally, I've been kind of traveling more. I think that with the way that I write a little bit more now has to do with kind of more playing with that kind of spatial unconsciousness of poems, the unconsciousness of voices that are happening in poems, and also with I don't know, with the way that words sound. Like my partner is a poet, so, and for them, words and the sound of words is really important to them for how they write poetry, which is not necessarily a way that I think about poetry, but I think that they probably had a huge impact on me. But yeah, it's weird. I think like immediately as the pandemic happened, I immediately was just talking to like people all the time, where it was days where it was like, I'm talking to people at work because I have to, but I'm talking to like my friends, Greek, Sophia, hello. And I'm talking to my family. It was just like FaceTimes all the time. And with my students, it was just like FaceTimes all the time because it's like, what's going on? And just kind of that inconsistency, but also kind of like the, now I'm brought into people's home life. So that's just a different kind of reality that I wasn't exposed to. Like you don't see a client's home most of the time. So being invited to someone's home and seeing like their mom in the background, seeing their grandma in the background, it was just different. Yeah, I'm a very big like social relationships kind of thinker, because I'm a communist, but it's something where seeing like how people's reactions in like interactions with each other in a way that I basically have to kind of guess when I'm doing counseling or psychotherapy. I'm always kind of like, I have an idea of what this looks like from the sketch of what we've talked about in our sessions. And then seeing that kind of material reality is really interesting. But Ted?
Yeah, it's really interesting the way both of you have framed it. I mean, it's interesting because for me too, like my partner is works in a hospital in Philly, and I'm like immunocompromised, and so it's just been a very strange. It's been a very, very strange time, and what happened was I wrote 3 books last year, like basically like the equivalent of 3 books, more like, more or less. And unlike every, it took me a minute to sort of realize what was happening, but for years and years, I wrote mostly, I would use notes and stuff, handwritten notes, but I would type all my poems. And then in 2020, everything became much more physical. Like it was much more of like a physical like reality of like writing. So I like wrote, I like did an erasure text like right as lockdowns were starting. Because I was like, I picked up a Robert Bly book and I was like, man, this fucking honky sucks. I hate these poems. These poems are so shitty, stupid Robert Bly. Like I really hate Robert Bly. Or his poems at least, but probably him too. I don't really know anything except his MRA stuff, his men's rights activism stuff. So he kind of seems like a D-bag. But anyway, like I did an erasure text, and then these other poems I did were kind of like using a lot of collage techniques. And then I finished this collage techniques project that was like, a couple, like a pretty long project. And then I had a dream that I don't remember my dreams very often. I had a dream that I was writing on a big scroll. And so I bought a big roll of butcher paper and started hanging up butcher paper and writing using Sharpie, and just like writing these poems using Sharpie. And so everything, you know, became much more kind of physically intimate, like the practice of writing became physically intimate when I couldn't, let's say, hear those languages that David was, you know, talking about. Or I think that if I will say that, you know, like some of the stuff that I wrote, it was probably so deep in my own head that I don't really know whether it's worth sharing, right? But you know, some of it I think was, I feel like I was dealing a lot with like, what are the underlying structures of reality, and how do those underlying structures of the reality we live in relate to what we see, and what are the gulfs, and a lot of the work, at least in the last book, was kind of focused on that sort of thing, or those sorts of issues. So yeah, that's kind of how it changed for me, at least.
Yes, thank you all. And thanks, Peter, for the question. And there is another, and then I think, we might wrap up after that. This one's for David in particular, from Stacy. Thanks, Stacy. I love the poems in Duppies that are after people, and your tribute poems this evening. What is the import of the tribute poem for you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry, mine muted. No, I'm not. Sorry. Probably making loads of noise. Sorry. Yeah, thanks, Stacy. Well, some of them are just about acknowledging somebody else's, the importance of somebody else's presence. And obviously, you know, poetry feeds off the absence of these presences. I mean, the whole genre of elegy is all about that kind of odd relationship where as soon as something is gone, you realize how much you valued it, and something pours out of you. And you know, Sean Bonney is an important poet. He's like a force of nature for so many different people, and his work brings into being a certain kind of reality, which forces you to collide with it. You can't just simply process it at a level of mental. You have to physically deal with it, and I feel the same way with certain kinds of music. A lot of music just goes straight over my head, but there's a kind of music which hits you in the solar plexus, and then your body starts thinking about it before your mind is even caught up. And the way in which I think of these poems, it's like at the rear end of a train trying to get to the engine room, if you know what I mean. And I'm trying to think about the sonorities of language, going back to the noise question, which we began with. Music forces me to hear words differently. And all of these people I write tributes for are not just musicians, they are wordsmiths too. And there's something I do with language and sound, which I think makes something else happen within language and in my relationship to language, which I'm trying to work out. And a tribute is a kind of weird word. What I'm trying to do really is work out my own way of hearing by listening to other people. And Sean Bonney is a different example. I mean, a lot of these books are scattered with tributes. One is to Stephen Rodifer too, who's a completely different kind of poet, but nonetheless a kind of a vital poet who makes you realize the importance of being alive now, at every moment, and why poetry matters. Because, you know, a lot of poetry, I would say, and I would say this as a provocation, is just language. And then there's other kinds of poetry which makes language seem strange and reinvents it. And, you know, the poems that matter to me do that. And, you know, so I write tributes to those moments which are rare and few and far between, but when they happen, you know they happen, and they happen in your body, not just in your head.
Thanks for that. And Stacy for the question. And again, thank you so much. Yeah, one more time for, silently with your hand clap emojis, right? For D.S. Marriott, Jasmine Gibson, Ted Rees, thank you so incredibly much.
Everybody.
Truly amazing reading. And thank you, Stacy, for bringing us all together. So now's the awkward part where we just log off. So thanks.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much, Ted and David and Jasmine.
Yeah. Wonderful time. Yeah.
Thank
Nice.
you again.
I love that response to that last that question, David. It was really lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely meeting you. I hope to bump into you guys soon. Thanks for your readings.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you. Au revoir.
Okay.
Everyone.
Bye.
Be well.
Good night.
See you